China is lying about its GDP again. The actual numbers are much worse. And making it worse is the skyrocketing unemployment. Perfect recipe for disaster. Here's all about China's negative GDP growth that's sending their economy tumbling. Fake GDP. According to economists, the accuracy of China's GDP data has declined over time. It's the only nation where the measurement of crucial inputs and output components is in doubt. Talks about the GDP have become very political. For instance, to calculate GDP in the US, various outputs are measured, but China's leaders often set their GDP goals last. This forces officials to borrow whatever necessary funds to reach the goal. Many experts think the figures are manipulated to overestimate growth. China's quarterly GDP figures are based on data from local governments. They are the most affected and the farthest from the truth. Very rarely is someone held accountable for falsifying economic data. The COVID lockdowns and mass testing in 2022 reportedly caused the Chinese economy to contract to 3% growth. What was reported? 5%. What goes unnoticed is that the issues that contributed to China's sluggish economy last year are still present this year, especially the still declining property industry. Approximately 25% of China's economy is made up of the property sector. Reuters calculated that after falling 19.7% in May 2023, real estate sales plunged 28.1% year over year in June. Beijing is also thinking about extra stimulus programs. It's contrary to what policymakers would be expected to do if the economy was expanding at a 5% rate, right? The fact is that China is currently experiencing a severe structural slowdown. A loop of lies. It started along with a slowdown in credit growth in 2018 and 2019. Then, the COVID lockdowns over the past 3 years made things worse. The largest source of fake GDP numbers is fabrication at the provincial and individual levels. Falsification mostly happens in rural communities where local leaders are more likely to only want good news. Why? Because their reputations are based on how well their community is doing economically. Leaders find it difficult to return to accurate figures after falsifying one report, because doing so would mean reporting growth that was less than actual to restore output balance. As a result, provincial GDP statistics continue to be exaggerated. So it's normal to have doubts about official economic data from China. The official numbers would still fall short of accurately capturing the growth of an economy that's growing and changing so swiftly. Yup. Even if every Chinese economic statistic were provided honestly and accurately to the best of a person's knowledge. Another disappointing set of economic data has reinforced the case for stagnant growth. It raised concerns that China's economy is on the cusp of deflation. Beijing reported that the second quarter's GDP increased by 6.3% from a year earlier. That's fallen short of market expectations of 7.3%. Also, this represented a 0.8% gain from the first quarter. It was slower than the 2.2% quarterly rate seen in the first 3 months of the year. China's producer prices decreased in June by 5.4% from a year earlier. That's 0.8% less from a month earlier, which was already less than analysts predicted. The yearly reduction in June was the steepest since December 2015, and the 9th straight decline for China. Annual consumer price inflation was unchanged in June, missing Reuters' projections for a 0.2% increase. Needless to say, it's not looking good, folks. Sinking economy. Compared to a year earlier, China's GDP grew 6.3% in the second quarter. It still fell short of market expectations. Export demand remained weak. Also, consumer confidence is being undermined by falling property values. Nearly all of China's 70 major cities saw a fall in the value of newly built commercial residential buildings. The state of the world economy at the moment is quite unstable. The Chinese economy is already showing worrying behavior. Europe is in a recession, and it seems like only the Americans have shown some resiliency. New GDP data from China's National Bureau of Statistics shows the country's economic recovery has slowed. In comparison to the same quarter in 2018, the second largest economy in the world only expanded by 6.3%. Given Shanghai's 2-month COVID-19 lockdown last spring, the rate is lower than anticipated. Also, the dollar value of Chinese exports decreased by more than 12%. That represents a huge nosedive since the pandemic's peak in February 2020. Prices for Chinese goods and services also dropped by 1.4%, and that's the biggest drop since the global financial crisis of 2008. To make things worse, there's no jobs for the youth of China. Citizens aged 16 to 24 have the worst unemployment rate since at least 2018. And those who have jobs, their annual incomes continue to drop. Deflation is to blame for China's dismal financial performance. The country's export rates have fallen as a result of weak spending. Local governments are experiencing financial difficulties, and along with that, investment keeps declining. But get this. Officials in Beijing link the drop in commodity prices to consumer stingy spending. But global economists argue that China's zero-COVID policy is the real culprit. Some people even claim that Beijing's influence on the world has reached its end. Skyrocketing unemployment. After the zero-COVID limitations were lifted, China's economy saw a slight rise. But youth unemployment has remained consistently high. The mismatch between the roles that are available and the ones that young people are studying for is likely a contributing factor. China's urban unemployment rate is decreasing, and the 16 to 24 age group defies the general trend. It grew to 20.4% in April. That is more than twice the pre-pandemic level for that age group of around 10% in April 2019. Young people are often especially vulnerable during economic downturns. The pandemic was hard on service jobs that hire more young workers already. Seems like it might have magnified the issue. Also noticeable is the output gap. It's the distinction between an economy's current output and its potential output. In the first quarter of this year, that gap in the services sector shrunk a lot. Despite the rising demand for jobs, there will soon be a surplus of graduates. So in the coming months, China's youth unemployment rate will continue to rise. In other industries, this imbalance is very severe. For instance, compared to 2018, the number of graduates in the fields of education and sports increased by more than 20%, but the demand for recruiting at educational institutions decreased. The demand for workers has also been affected by recent regulatory changes affecting those industries, especially in the information technology, education, and real estate sectors. Given the importance of the young market to China's economy, the stakes are enormous for redressing these inequities. This generation spends a lot on communication, transportation, rent, culture, and education. Governments need their money, so the Chinese government has taken action to encourage college graduates to find employment. Recently, college graduates were given preference in the Chinese military's recruitment process. Also, in the next 2 years, 1 million internship positions will be created by state-owned businesses in the nation. Even so, skill imbalances can only be resolved through time. It would be better to address the mismatch between academic disciplines and industry demands, but this is a challenging and long-term task. It's unlikely to produce a noticeable improvement anytime soon. Deflation crisis. It's like China can't catch a break. It's one issue after another. As a large portion of the West continues to deal with higher than normal rates of inflation, China is confronted with a quite different issue: a potential price deflation that could portend major economic turmoil in the future. Consumer prices barely increased in June compared to the same month last year, according to official data. Inflation was still low, at just 0.4% per year, even when excluding the volatile food and energy industries. At the same time, a shocking 5.4% annual fall was seen in China's producer pricing index. It gauges what producers charge for their products, and yeah, that was also dropped. This warning of wholesale price deflation seems to be the outcome of a decline in demand, which is bad news for Chinese producers. Lower pricing for items might seem like good news for consumers, but the entire economy may suffer a lot from widespread price drops. For consumers, high inflation poses a serious issue, but economists argue that a stable, low rate of price inflation is essential to a strong economy. Typically, the United States and other advanced Western countries aim for an inflation rate of around 2% annually. Deflation happens when prices start to fall across the entire economy, or when low inflation impedes economic progress. Profits for businesses also come under strain from it. This can lead to a decrease in employment and income, as well as a decrease in the motivation to invest in new productive capacity. Deflation, which is huge for China, also makes it harder for borrowers to pay back their debts. Fixed loan payments are becoming more expensive, mainly because of the cost of other goods and services and the rising value of money. Local governments and many Chinese businesses are currently heavily indebted, making their financial future more difficult because of their falling revenue. China experienced rapid productivity development for several years. As a result, they could boast of double-digit economic growth rates. But productivity growth has drastically decreased in recent years. China will try to implement some kind of demand-boosting economic stimulus program. It's uncertain, though, if it will be successful. How bad is it looking? The Chinese government has in the past promoted stimulus plans, ones that prioritized infrastructure spending, though. Right now, future investment returns in the industry are on a nosedive. The U.S. and other countries will be affected if China continues to have low inflation. For the rest of the globe, it's sort of a two-edged sword. Reduced demand and deflation will cause China to import less from the rest of the globe, but it will result in a slight increase in price stability or even a decrease in the cost of Chinese exports. That might help to encourage price stability in the U.S. Remember when a massive stimulus program from Beijing helped the West's recovery? Yup, from the 2008 financial crisis. That era of explosive growth is over for them. This time, the post-COVID recovery in China is sporadic. Plus, geopolitical concerns make it doubtful that it will halt their looming recession. President Xi Jinping's foreign policy made countries cut their economic ties with China, so a crucial factor that used to sustain China's rapid growth has waned. While it's clear that Xi wanted the Chinese economy to grow stronger, his policies had the opposite impact. Let us know what you think about China's economic crisis in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date, and we'll see you in the next video.